Hello everyone, this is Jeff with Mississippi and the Civil War. Welcome to the latest episode. And today I'm going to be talking about Mississippi Civil War photographs and also just kind of touching on how technology has made finding photographs and really information of any kind related to the Civil War so much easier. I began my career in the pre-internet era. My first job as a historian, it was, this is going back many years now, but it was 1996. And back then, if you wanted to do research, you had to go places. You had to go to the library, to go to the archive. If you couldn't go yourself, you had to write letters. And when I was working on my master's thesis, I wrote hundreds of letters to institutions all over the country just looking for sources of information. But the internet has made all of that so much easier. As more and more collections are digitized and put online, it really brings the world to you and just gives you a multitude of options for finding information right at your very fingertips. And these photographs that I'm going to be showing you today are a great example. A lot of these I did not know existed until I started looking online and found these in various collections all over. And I have to say, the 21st century is a wonderful time to be a historian because just with the ease of research and so many more sources being available now, it really makes our job so much easier and also makes it the works that we are researching so much richer because we're able to find so much additional material. And so today I'm going to be showing you a number of photographs, and I hope you'll find these as interesting as I do. Now, a good point, or a good case in point for the kind of things you can find online that you probably never would have found in the pre-internet era, at least not without a lot of hard looking, are some of the photographs taken in Mississippi during the Civil War in 1865 that I found posted on the Flickr account of the George Eastman House International Museum of Photography and Film, which is located in Rochester, New York. And this is a picture of the museum. It's a grand palatial estate that used to belong to George Eastman and was his home. And now they've turned it into a museum. And they have a very large collection of photographs, and a number of them were taken during the Civil War. And I've only found 4 images from their collections that were taken in Mississippi, but all 4 of them were images I had never seen before, and I want to share them with you. The George Eastman House Museum is located on the estate of entrepreneur and philanthropist George Eastman, the founder of the Eastman Kodak Company. The estate was designed or designated a National Historic Landmark in 1966, and from the outset the museum's mission was to collect, preserve, and present the history of photography and film, which makes sense given the company's very close connection to this industry. The museum opened its doors on November 9th, 1949, displaying its core collections in the former public rooms of the Eastman House. Now, to say their holdings are vast is just an understatement. Their holdings comprise more than 400,000 photographs and negatives dating from the time of the invention of photography to the present day. They have 28,000 motion picture films, 3 million other cinematic objects, including letters, scripts, musical scores, lobby cards, posters, film stills, you name it. And so this is just one collection. But and you can imagine the impact that having thousands of collections just like this one made available online, what a boon that is for researchers. And with so many images in their collection, when I first discovered it, I thought, there's got to be some Mississippi images in there. Fortunately, they've got a very good search engine that you can use to search their vast collection. And it turned out I was right. And they were not just any photographs either, but some rare photos taken in Mississippi during the Civil War. For example, Up until I perused the Eastman collection, I thought that there were no known images taken of the town of Iuka, Mississippi during the Civil War. In fact, the only depiction of the city I was aware of was an illustration that appeared in Harper's Weekly magazine on October 4th, 1862, this very illustration right here. But I was wrong. There was indeed a photograph of the town of Iuka. It was just waiting to be discovered. And this is the image. And it is labeled View of Iuka, Mississippi from the Brinkley House. And to give you a close-up, this is a close-up view of the town of Iuka. And the photograph did indeed have an identification on it. It just said, View of Iuka, Mississippi from near the Brinkley House. I did a little research and found that the Brinkley House is still standing in Iuka. Today it is known by the name Dunrobin. And this is a photograph of the Brinkley House, aka Dunrobin, taken probably in the 1930s. It was originally built in the late 1850s by lawyer R.C. Brinkley and his wife Elizabeth. The home was located on the eastern outskirts of Iuka, and if the photographer set up his camera near the Brinkley House, as it says in the description, he was probably looking towards the west, towards the town. Now, if you remember, the Battle of Iuka had been fought on September 19, 1862. It had taken place outside the town, off to the southwest. Now, my next image is labeled Vicksburg from Fort Castle, the interior of the fort. In the foreground, Whistling Dicks, now dismounted. And you can see this is an image taken in Vicksburg in presumably 1865. The Fort Castle, which is shown here, also known as the Castle Battery, was one of the Union fortifications built in Vicksburg after the siege. The Federals held Vicksburg from July 4th, 1863 through the end of the war, and they had to be prepared to defend it should the Confederates ever attempt to retake the city. So they dug their own line of entrenchments, and you can see I have a map here drawn during the war, and it shows the Federal line of entrenchments, which was much shorter than the Confederate line because it had to be held by a much smaller garrison. And you can see this earthwork right here, where I've got the arrow pointing. That's Fort Grant. That's the photograph that's depicted here, also known as the Castle Battery. The gun that they call Whistling Dick is not Whistling Dick. Whistling Dick was a very famous gun during the Siege of Vicksburg, a Confederate gun. It was a rifled 18-pounder, so named because of the unusual whistling sound its shells made when it was fired. That gun disappeared when the siege ended. No one really knows what happened to it. It's speculated that the Confederates threw it in the Mississippi River to keep it from being captured, but that's really speculation. There are a lot of stories about what happened to Whistling Dick, but so far it is not turned up. So it's one of the great missing named Civil War canon, and if it ever turns up, that will be quite the historical find. And originally on the site of Fort Castle was a home known as the Castle, and it was torn down after the Siege of Vicksburg so that the Castle Battery could be built. The castle, the home, had been built by banker Thomas E. Robbins in the early 1840s from hexagonal bricks that had been imported from England. And this is his ad from the Vicksburg papers. He was with, or actually no, this is not his. This is the next owner of the castle. The grounds covered 17 acres. They were bordered by an Osage orange hedge, And at the time of the Civil War, the home was owned by Armistead Burwell. That's his advertisement there. He was with the firm of Mason and Burwell, attorneys at law. He was a lawyer from Virginia who was a very outspoken Unionist. And even though he was a Unionist, that did not save his home after the siege, because the Federals wanted the property for an artillery site, and they got it. So unfortunately, the home was torn down. Now, the next photo from the Eastman collection is shown on the left here, and it is labeled Shirley House, rear of Vicksburg, headquarters of Generals Logan and Leggett, rendezvous of Generals Grant, Sherman, McPherson, McClernand, Osterhaus, and others for consultation during the siege of Vicksburg. Well, it's a long title. And the Shirley House, again, is a very well-known structure in Vicksburg. It's the only surviving civilian structure inside the modern Vicksburg National Military Park. And you can see here in a modern photo I took a few years back, the home looks very much the same. It's had extensive renovations over the years, but it looks very similar to its wartime appearance. And speaking of wartime appearance, this is a photograph of the Shirley House from the Library of Congress collections, taken just after the siege. In fact, you can see one of the Union approach trenches running literally right through the front yard, and the shelters built by the Union troops of the 45th Illinois Infantry just behind the house. And known to the Union soldiers during the siege as the White House, the Shirley House was owned by James and Adeline Shirley. The couple had bought the home and in the years before the Civil War. It had been described then as a most desirable residence in a healthy location. During the siege, the home was anything but a healthy location. It was directly in front of the Confederate fortifications, and it would have been burned by the rebels if not for the stubbornness of Mrs. Shirley, who refused to leave the residence. The stubborn lady, in fact, remained in the home with her young son and some servants for about the first 3 days of the siege, until she was finally persuaded by the Federal soldiers and probably the high volume of fire being shot around the house to get out and get to safety. And then Alice Shirley, the daughter of James and Adeline, wrote of the siege. She said, "Those 3 days must have been a time of great distress to my mother, and I think she never entirely recovered from the strain caused by the war. She has told me that she and the 2 house servants sat most of the time in the chimney corner where the bullets might not strike them." So she had a most exciting 3 days of the beginning of the siege of Vicksburg, until they got out and got to safer territory some miles away from Vicksburg. And the final photo from the Eastman collection is this one, and it is labeled "Site of the Proposed National Cemetery, Vicksburg, Mississippi." And that's precisely what it's showing. It's showing the area where they were going to put in the Vicksburg National Cemetery, where they were going to bury all of the Union dead who had died in and around Vicksburg during the war. And here, shown on the left here, is a modern view of the cemetery and you can see just a few of the more than 17,000 Union graves that are in the National Cemetery. In fact, it's the largest Civil War cemetery in the entire United States. The Vicksburg National Cemetery had been created in 1866 by Act of Congress, which was passed on July 17th, 1862. The cemetery contains 116 acres, 40 acres of which have burials. And then, as I said, there are approximately 17,000 soldiers buried in the cemetery. And unfortunately, a large number of them are unknowns. A lot of the original burials for these soldiers had only hasty graves. Perhaps there was no headboard to begin with, or if there was one, they rotted away over the years. So unfortunately, the names of a lot of the soldiers buried in the cemetery are in fact unknown. And this is just 4 photographs from one collection. If you think about how many collections are out there, there's still, literally an unknown and unknowable number of photographs out there waiting to be found. And hopefully, as more and more collections are put online, we'll start seeing more photographs of places in Mississippi that no one's ever seen before. In fact, just the other day, I was doing some research on the digital archives of the Tennessee State Archives, and I found this photo. This is Sergeant Dick Johnson of the 3rd United States Colored Cavalry. He was from Vicksburg, and the 3rd United States Colored Cavalry had been recruited in and around Vicksburg after the siege had ended. The 3rd United States Colored Cavalry had a very good war record. They saw a lot of action in Mississippi from 63 all the way through to the end of the war. In fact, they probably saw more action than any other United States colored regiment raised in Mississippi. They were tough fighters. They were well respected for their service, but you don't see a lot of photographs of the enlisted men. And so when you come across a photograph like this, it really is a treasure. And this is the kind of thing I just love to see, and because I think it really brings home the human cost of the war when you see the faces of the men that actually served in the Civil War. So hopefully we'll be seeing more images like this one of Sergeant Johnson come to light over the next few years as more and more material is made available online. And that's going to end this episode. It's not a long one, but I wanted to get something out for you. I hope you like it. If you did, please give it a like and a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel and you like this content, please subscribe, leave some comments, let me know what you think. If you have any ideas for new episodes, please let me know. I would love to hear them. I'm a one-man show, so I could use all the help I can get. But I really enjoy doing this. I enjoy sharing the history, and as long as people will keep watching, I'll keep making them. So I hope you have a good day, and I'll be coming back to you with a new episode very soon.